Good morning and welcome to our special edition of POLOTIKI, brought to you by News 24. We are live from the ANC's 54th National Elective Conference. It's day 3 and finally it looks like we are nearing the end. But of course, for all of us, the long wait continues as we want to know who will be the next president of the ANC, replacing the outgoing one, President Jacob Zuma. Of course, the nominations for the top 6 happened last night, but we are hearing from inside the plenary that we could be nearing the end. Gauteng is the last of the provinces to vote, and we're expecting that their delegates will start voting quite shortly, and then the long wait for us as the Electoral Commission then starts doing the counting. But earlier on, our politics journalist Tshidi Madia spoke to the ANC's communications manager Kusela Sangoni and asked her for the latest. Well,
early or as late as midnight yesterday, delegates started voting. So we are sitting with 9 of the 12 provinces of an ANC conference that have voted. So 12 provinces obviously being the 9 geographical provinces plus the 3 leagues. So what is outstanding now is Gauteng, it's Mpumalanga as well as the Eastern Cape. So the voting process is proceeding quite smoothly and we're thinking that around 12 o'clock or so we should be done.
What happens once voting is done? How does the election process then unfold?
Well, what then happens is that there is, as you know, there's an electoral commission which is chaired by Comrade Cindy Somfenyane, together with other veterans and starlets of our movement, that oversees the elections. We also have observers, so each of the provinces will have observers over the election process, and then the counting begins. So once that has been completed for the top 6, plenary will be reconvened, or if plenary is in session, it will be adjourned for us to then receive that announcement of the top 6 officials.
How does counting done? People speak about the counting in the ANC and they say it's not digital, you do it by hand. It's a manual process?
It still remains a manual process. I think we are some way off from electronic voting. You'll know that we had discussed that in Polokwane, where a decision had been taken that we're going to retain manual counting. So it's done by hand. All 4,773 votes will be counted by hand.
For us as journalists who are here in the pen, in the kraal, what can we expect in terms of updates, briefings, and for our users online, people at home keeping an eye on this conference, what should they expect to happen in terms of timeframes? When do you think we'll hear of a new ANC president?
Okay, well, we do have a very busy day, and I mean, we pride ourselves on the fact that the ANC is a very transparent, accountable organization. So we've already started with a series of briefings. The first ones were on the sidelines of conference at 7 o'clock this morning. Comrade Lindiwe Zulu just speaking on issues around small business development. Around 10 o'clock, the Secretary General, Comrade Gwede Mantashe, will speak to us about the organizational report that he delivered and was adopted by a conference yesterday. We're still trying to chat to the Treasurer General, Comrade William Kize, to see if he would also speak to us. But we've also just received a notice that plenary will only resume at 12, not 9 o'clock as we initially scheduled. As far as the announcement of the leadership at this point, we don't want to speculate on that time, but it will be during the course of today.
Just very quickly, I just want to also understand the misunderstanding. There is a WhatsApp group where you're communicating with journalists. Last night there was an indication that voting wouldn't take place last night, it would happen today, and then that changed. What happened there?
Well, you know, conference is the highest decision-making body of the African National Congress. It supersedes any decision taken by any body or any structure. So there had been a recommendation from the Electoral Commission that voting only starts this morning. But the delegates to conference, who make up conference, the supreme decision body I'm talking about, decided that they would prefer to start voting last night. So hence then that voting resumed at that time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Well, that was the ANC's communications manager, Kusela Sangoni, speaking there to News 24's politics reporter, Tshidi Madia. We are hearing now the latest is that Gauteng is going to be the last province that votes. So as you heard, that long wait will be with us for quite some time. But you know, our editor-in-chief, Adrian Basson, has been crunching the numbers, and he is basically saying, based on the numbers, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has this race.
Hi, my name is Adrian Basson, editor of News 24. Something very exciting has happened today at the ANC National Conference. We received the numbers of the final ANC delegates that's eligible to vote after the credentials were adopted this morning. So we did some quick sums, looking at the spreadsheets of the branch nominations in all the provinces that came through a few weeks ago. And then what we did was we worked out the percentages of support that each of the presidential candidates got in those provinces. So take, for example, KwaZulu-Natal, where there was a total of just over 650 branches who nominated their presidential candidates. Of those branches, Cyril Ramaphosa scored 29% and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma 70%. We applied this method to all the provinces to work out what percentage of branches voted for these presidential nominees. What we then did was we took the final list of delegates who came to conference, who was now being confirmed and adopted by conference this morning. We applied those percentages to this final list and calculated how many people may up voting for either of the candidates. Of course, a caveat, what this assumes is that every delegate who is here on behalf of his or her branch will vote in accordance with the branch's decision. So the calculation to get to close as possible to what an outcome may be assumes that delegates will vote the way their branches did during branch nominations. What could go wrong in that process, what could throw out our theory is, for example, things like bribery, like vote buying, if people are offered money or positions in exchange for voting for a different candidate, or if a delegate decides here at conference to change his or her mind about who they're voting for. After we tabulated the percentages of the provinces with the final delegates numbers, we added obviously the leagues, the Youth League, the Women's League, the Veterans League, as well as the PEC and the NEC. What's very important from this morning's numbers is the absolute clarity that Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma has been the big loser from the credentials process. If you look at the provincial numbers, she lost about 92 delegates from the Northwest. She lost 66 potential votes from KwaZulu-Natal and another 60 from the Free State. So over 200 delegates no longer able to vote for Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Ramaphosa also lost some delegates, in specifically Limpopo, which now has 76 less delegates than what they came with to conference. But here's the story, and this is where we're at on Sunday afternoon. If you add all these percentages of the provinces to the final list of delegates and the leagues, Cyril Ramaphosa ends on 2,633 votes against Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma's 2,135 votes. This means Ramaphosa will win if delegates vote according to their branches and if the branch nominations that decided which delegates comes to province stays the same. Mpumalanga is, of course, one very important deciding factor that we must clarify. So in this calculation, what we did with Mpumalanga is we literally split it 50-50. Why? Because with the branch nominations, what we saw was Ramaphosa getting 49% of the votes and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma 51%. There was, of course, 223 votes for unity candidate. And when I spoke to Didi Mabuza, the provincial chair, yesterday, he said that if there's two candidates, it's very likely that that unity vote will be split 50-50 between the two candidates. So in this calculation, we gave each of them 50% of Mpumalanga, which then brings out Ramaphosa on top with about 500 votes. That's really best case scenario for Cyril Ramaphosa. What's worst case scenario for him? Say he loses all those unity votes and they all go to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Maybe a last minute deal. We know that Mabuza is already the deputy presidential candidate on his slate. What happens to the numbers? Well, if you tabulate then, those numbers, Ramaphosa still wins, but with a much smaller margin of around 150 votes. So although this isn't conclusive, it's looking good for Ramaphosa at this stage. Lots of things could still happen. There could be skullduggery going on in the background. There could be delegates who change their minds. But if they stick to what their branches sent them here to do, if Mpumalanga consists in voting for Ramaphosa the way they did previously, still Ramaphosa is likely to win this race.
Well, that there was News 24 editor Adrian Basson doing his calculations based on the numbers we finally received in terms of delegates that are here at conference. As he repeatedly says, that calculation is based on what the branches had said going into conference, and it depends if the delegates that are currently here will actually vote according to mandate. Just in case you missed it, let's recap where the race is at currently. For the presidential nomination, it's official. It's only 2 candidates. It's Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa against Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. For the position of national chairperson is Gwede Mantashe, and he is going against Nathi Mthethwa, the current Minister of Arts and Culture. And then for the position of Secretary General, we've got Ace Magashule. They embattled. Do we still call him Free State chairperson? We don't know, but he is going against the former KwaZulu-Natal chairperson Senzo Mchunu. For the position of Deputy Secretary General is incumbent Jesse Duarte, and she's going against perhaps a lesser known individual in terms of ANC politics, but more known in terms of COSATU politics, as she is the first deputy president of COSATU, and that is Zingiswa Losi. And then let's look at the position of Treasurer General. It's the current Gauteng chairperson Paul Mashatile, and he is going against the current international relations minister Maite Nkwana-Mashabane. She's also, of course, the treasurer for the ANC Women's League. But to get into all of this and the number crunching even further, I've got with me our resident analyst Melanie Verwoerd. Good morning. And also Ralph Matecha. Adrian is saying, based on the numbers, let me start with you, Melanie. Adrian is saying, based on the numbers, Ramaphosa has this. Do you agree?
I don't, actually.
Great.
And I'm very cautious about it. I'm not saying definitely NDZ will win, although I have to say my gut is telling me we need to be more prepared for that at this stage. The problem with the numbers are that, first of all, I've said it and I'll keep on saying that the ANC has never decided a race on the back of a spreadsheet, never. So much comes into it. The one process is a nomination process, then there's a voting process. The two sometimes meet, as they did years ago, but they don't, increasingly, as the years have gone by, they don't meet up as closely as that. Now, the reason why those statistics are helpful is that on the one hand it gives us some indication, but it's nothing more than an indication. There are a few fault lines, and Adrian rightly refers to some of them, but one of the other biggest ones that we don't know is where are the big branches and where do they go? And there's no way of knowing that unless you're sitting in Lutuli House, and we don't know that, and that can make a huge difference.
I want us to explain that to our viewers, because that was the one question that repeatedly came to us to say, if Cyril Ramaphosa has the branch nominations, shouldn't it be automatic that he will then emerge as the winner? But of course, there's a difference here. Some branches have more than one delegate coming through.
That's
Just
right.
explain that.
So how it works is, for you to have a properly constituted branch, you need 100 members that have been signed up, and you have to meet frequently. And if you have that properly constituted branch and you've been accredited to the conference, you get for your first 100, you get 1 delegate. For every 250 members that you have after that, you get another delegate. So if you have a really big branch with lots of members in it, then of course you get more delegates. So what we could see was that certain provinces had bigger branches, because if your branch numbers were very much less than your actual delegate numbers, then you could say, in that province.
But there was
big
a cap.
branches.
There was a cap that was put into it, because we know that KwaZulu-Natal coming here was basically saying to the Secretary General Gwede Mantashe, we are a much bigger province, but you've put a cap, which means that you decreasing what we should have. We actually deserve 100 more than the 870 that were initially allocated, Ralph.
I mean, the numbers game here is very interesting, and I think we should put it out there that nominations do not directly translate into voting. And if you look at the ANC elective conferences in the past, there was never this kind of tension. So in the past, in the previous conferences, although people were differing, but the process of disruption, I think even ANC members did not yet understand their own processes to a point where they could infiltrate them. Now the process has evolved. In the past, you have had a situation where the nominations were a very strong indicator as to how people will vote, a strong indicator, because there were no infiltration of what was happening since the nomination until the votes are being cast. But then if you look at it now, this conference delayed by about a day in accepting those credentials. We need to note that each and every hour that this conference delays, actually, there is an opportunity for someone to lobby someone.
And that lobbying has been intense.
And we need to note that. We've been saying this, that you cannot decide the conference of the ANC by just looking at that. Look at what has happened. Let's look at the first phase of the nomination, what we have seen on plenary, what happened at plenary there. People have declined. When people are declining, those who nominated them need to go somewhere else. Zweli Mkhise's decision to actually decline the nomination of Deputy President, it is very interesting. The question is, what was his condition? Where is he taking that indication of support? Where would it be going? Did he agree to a deal? One of the papers is already claiming that, publishing that he has entered into a deal. So the lobbying and also the process of nomination, when you get here, the tensions, the song, everything, individual candidates being insecure, having to actually restructure, reformulate their political careers right here on the spot, result in alignment that I think the delegation are being pushed and lobbied to a particular direction. So it is very complex. But lastly here on these numbers, I'll give you an example. Look at Paul Mashadile's nomination as the Treasurer General, about 1,500. There is no way in my mind that you can attribute Paul Mashadile's strong nomination only to CR's camp, because it doesn't match with those others who are within the CR camp. He's shooting very high, Mashadile, almost, if you look at it strongly, in a way that you could say he might have been able to dip on both factions. So below the position of a deputy president, there could be a very interesting reshuffle, whether intentional or not. We'll look at it. Yeah.
We will talk a little bit about that. But Melanie, I thought that you could give us some insights about this lobbying, because you're a former insider. What actually happens? You know, yesterday we spoke to Supra Mahumapelo, the ANC chair in the Northwest, and he was saying that, you know, we're managing to get Ramaphosa's delegates or people that had nominated him to come over to our side, and he is of course supporting Dlamini Zuma and saying that they're expecting to win by 700 votes.
You know, Ralph has really indicated some of the movements that have happened in the movement, and I think to understand also why the lobbying is so much more intense, it's also important to understand that there has gradually over the last three, this is now the third conference, in the last three, there has been a shift of power in a way in the ANC as well. At Polokwane, the provinces still had incredible power and control, and they had strong discipline. And people went, but people believed in the provinces, and they trusted the provinces, and they did that. Then there was a move, because people felt that the provinces started intervening too much in the nomination and the outcome, to move it more down to the region. So by the time you got to Mangaung, there was a lot more going on. And in fact, if you look at Polokwane, the difference between the nominations, I've been told, and the actual outcome was about 1%. But in Mangaung, it started changing, because also now there was a lot more happening on a regional level. The provinces lost a bit of control. This time around, they've really pushed it down to the branches, which in principle is nice because it democratizes the whole idea of decision making. So in principle, good idea. But of course, it also democratizes the corruption and the other things that are happening. Look, it's not that everybody is bribable in the ANC, far from it. But we know a lot is going on. We know all the allegations that the Ramaphosa camp, and it's not been denied, that they have put all their delegates in a really nice hotel separately, you know, the Monte Cassino hotel paid for by some businesses, which will not go down well in the ANC. And certainly a lot of people, even on the CR camp, would be uncomfortable with that. But we also know that there's been rumors of lots of money.
100,000?
Or 50,000 a day and so on. In fact, somebody forwarded me a tweet from somebody that they know really well yesterday who said he's in the CR camp and he's already made 29,000 today, you know. So, I mean, it's happening both sides, you know.
Do they still accept people?
Nobody approached me.
But I think, actually, the one thing that is interesting for me is if you actually understand how some of this lobbying process is working, and I don't know if you've spoken about this, but one of the things that happen is, so they call caucuses and they say all the CR people meet on that field. and some people might have seen the stuff that you've also posted.
Yeah,
and then everybody disappears to that field, that CR. Then they have their regional people there, and they start breaking it up. And so there's some organizers who know every little person there that is supposed to vote a certain way. And if by the next night they're not there, they go, whoa, where are they? And that's also part of keeping control about the caucus.
I mean, I've been told that one of the most important things is that you have people appointed to guard delegates so that you don't see them running off to the other people's caucus. And that's how it's actually, and every day you do literally a register. Mahlatsi present, Melanie present,
also,
Ralph present.
But also to make sure that somebody doesn't get waylaid somewhere, you know, or is hungover today and forgets to get up, you know. So it's also, it'd be very interesting. One of the things which would be interesting in retrospect is to see how high the turnout was. Because even though everybody's supposed to vote, in previous conferences, if you actually look at the votes, there are far fewer votes in the end than actual accredited delegates that went there. So we also have to look at what the turnout's going to be. And my suspicion is it's going to be incredibly high. You know?
Before we get into the rest of the top 6, I just want to get something from you, Melanie. I mean, we had a change of system in terms of voting. Previously, the nominations happened at a provincial level. That was scrapped. Branches had to nominate. Those envelopes were then counted at the Provincial General Council. That's just to make sure that they try and end the slate voting and give back the branches that power. Did you think that was a good idea?
Look, as I said, it's got its pros because people were worried that, like in the past, that the provinces started intervening, you know, that they were wranglings of the votes and so on. I don't think the process has fundamentally changed. I think they just safeguarded the process a lot more to make sure that letters also went directly to Latulia House so that people weren't actually, you know, messing it up in between somewhere in the regulation. I mean, what's also interesting, of course, if you talk about the voting process, is that there was for a long time a push to actually separate the top positions, you know, so that they voted one at a time. Now, many of us who had gone through this before, including yourself, were going, yo, that's going to take like 2 weeks to vote on. I mean, look how long this has gone. Now you want to vote 6 times, you know, plus your NEC. So I don't think that was very practical from the start. But now they're doing all on one, and that's interesting because we have to now figure out, and I frankly agree with Rav about the fact that I think we're going to see a mixed slate.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because the slate things have now come in. You know, again, it's much stronger now, and as you know, yesterday during the nomination process, there was a lot of hoo-ha about the fact that they wanted to take the papers in, which means that they want to vote according to slates as well as they forget. And that's true. I mean, I voted in some of these elections. It's hard to remember all 80 names because they're not all from your province, you know.
Melanie, I just want us to explain to our viewers maybe who, you know, it was the weekend yesterday, just to explain that battle that went on to plenary before nominations. So there were 2 issues that were raised by delegates, mostly from the Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma camp. The first one was that the Electoral Commission said to the delegates, you have to bring your identity document so that we can make sure that it corresponds with the tag that you have been given that says that you are an accredited voting delegate. That was shot down by some of the delegates. And then the second issue was that the Electoral Commission was saying that we don't want you to be going into the voting booth with the whole list, with a list of the names of people that you want in the top 6 and also in the National Executive Committee. And it was a bit of a debate. I mean, one of the quotes that I remember from yesterday was Mzwandile Masina, the current mayor of Ekurhuleni, saying that we have to go in with the list because people might end up voting for people that they see on television who have actually participated in marches by Save South Africa. So just to bring into a little bit, but of course at the end it was agreed that you will need an identity document. Ralph, what did you make of that battle inside plenary?
I think that the impression that came out there is that there seems to be doubt about the credibility of the cards to stand on their own. Because if it wasn't an issue, I don't really think people should have argued about it. Why was it such a big issue? Anyway, if you could strengthen your ID by your identification, accreditation, you have an ID, that's much better. But the mere fact that they spend a lot of time on that showed that there is a suspicion that maybe even cards could be duplicated for that matter and so forth. You find that there are more voting cards than there are people actually and so forth. So, but one thing that I also think is very important to note about this conference is that there is a willingness by either faction to just quarrel over just about anything, including a very, very small thing. For me, it gives me the impression that people are so suspicious of each other. They are raising issues. They're putting those issues on record about processes. Then they move on into they agree, move on into the process of voting. I get a sense that it's more like laying traps, that if I lose, I did raise this concern. There seems to be more willingness to actually doubt the processes. ANC members, they were looking so suspicious towards each other, expressing suspicion towards each other. I really wonder if at the end of the day, they will fully accept results as having come through a free and fair process.
Look, I think, Melanie, the ANC was relieved the fact that credentials were adopted and were adopted so quickly, even though we know that there were huge problems with those. And it looks like, you know, as Ralph continues to say, there's this thing of kicking the can down the road. We spoke to Supra again, Mahumapelo, and he was saying, look, there were 2 emergency meetings between chairpersons to save the election, to save the conference, because a collapse would be in neither's favor. Do you think it might come back to haunt them?
No, I mean, I think for the ANC, they needed to have this conference. I mean, the country needed them to have this conference as well. The markets, the economy.
All of us.
Yeah, also, as we can hear from all our voices, we need this to stop at some point as well. But so I think, I mean, they were always going to push, to have this thing done. And they met previously, before the conference, of course, also as chairpersons, and said, we want this thing to happen. But I agree with Ralph that I think, there is this new appetite. No matter what the president said in his speech the other night, there is an appetite amongst members to sue. They've discovered the sort of strength of the court. And again, with this pushing down of authority down to the branches, everybody can sue. And, it can be ordinary branch members. So I think they have to be so incredibly careful about what they are doing all the time. And this is why also I think, are they erring the whole time on the side of caution, just to make sure that this conference actually, there is as little as possible contestation that we can have at the end. Because what would be very frustrating? I mean, can you imagine the scenario, and I maybe shouldn't even raise it, but that we go through all of this, there is a result today, people take it to court, and the court rules it out. I mean, can you imagine that disaster?
And that fear lives with them.
I thought about the Kenya situation, which is at national level, and you ask yourself that, I mean, it could happen here. That is why they're tiptoeing around each other and so forth, trying to clarify just about anything. When you get into a conference, it's one thing when it's a normal processes and you are not panicking, you are doing it as normally as you would, but it's quite another to make sure that you just keep on removing landmines as you are moving through the whole thing, because the narrative is very clear. It's about saving this conference, and I think that is what we might see today, the process of releasing the result. I anticipate it might be followed by lengthy explanation of how it all went about, to make sure that there are no loopholes there that could result in or the legitimacy of the result being questioned thereof. This is a conference that needs saving. That is just where the ANC are, and unfortunately the courts are babysitting them.
Well, just for a bit of a break, I mean, of course, we know that the big one is about what will happen with the final outcome of those elections. But one of the things that you have to love about the ANC is the singing. And one of the songs, I'm declaring it the song of the conference, is the one about unity. I started hearing it at the Mpumalanga Provincial General Council. At that time, there was no individual leader in that song, but then we came to conference and then we started hearing it from Nkosazana Dlamini supporters, and it says Pakama Nkosazana, means rise Nkosazana. But then something happened. The Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma supporters have been the loudest so far throughout this conference. And then last night we got a video with Ramaphosa supporters, and guess what? They're singing the same song. Let's take a listen. Melanie.
I mean, we have to say, you go into that hall and everybody is singing, and you know, it's hard to explain to people who haven't been on a floor of an ANC conference, just the energy. I mean, there's 5,000 people and they're all singing.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, like yesterday when we were walking out, there was a group from KZN with little placards which said KZN for CR17.
Yes,
and they were singing, they were on chairs, and the rhythm was going. But right across the aisle from where they were Nkosazana supporters. And they were like showing, you know, they were all moving in unison, telling them to shove off, and also showing them it's time for Nkosazana. You know, so there's also these signs which everybody knows, and then there's this sort of substitution thing, or the changeover thing. It's amazing, the singing off that can happen. And to people from outside, it might actually look like it's an aggressive thing that happens. I think actually it releases a lot of tension, and there's a lot of humor in it as well, you know, and you can see people laughing. I mean, at times, and certainly yesterday when we were watching that thing about with the Electoral Commission, it got very heated. The ANC hasn't quite figured out how to handle the media, so we were all, as you know, seated on the ground, right on the floor, because they couldn't get enough chairs. And so we were sitting right in front of the Women's League, and it got intense. There was a lot of swearing and shouting at the chairperson, who is ANC.
I wanted to say, did she not remind you of of Parliament? You know, this time around it wasn't the EFF, it wasn't John Steenhuisen that she's battling with, but her own comrades.
I mean, at some point she was like throwing hands. I mean, she made this gesture that goes like this, and
you know, like I'm
left.
out of here.
And also and also was it the chair of the electoral commission ended up saying that, look, I'm not your leader. Your leaders will decide this. But later, a few minutes ago, then you have was it Mantashe coming on there saying that, look, the electoral commission is made of elders from the ANC. And I start thinking they're supposed to be leaders now. And then someone from the floor refers to the electoral chairperson as, you mkulu, let that mkulu sit down, and you can't impose all this thing
and
on
you're
us.
political. That was the funny one.
I have to say this. You can say whatever you want to say about the ANC. I can't find any political party in South Africa that is as democratic as that. They fail to follow their own processes. No doubt, they've been taken to court not to follow the constitution of the country in most cases, if you notice, to follow their own constitution. So if you look at the internal processes, you look at the mass nature of the ANC, you look at the fact that even if elitism can crop in within the ANC, where you have special interest groups trying to seize leadership, appropriate structures, they still have to go through the branches, one way or another. You don't find that most political parties actually can't put up a conference like this. Contentious as it is, clumsy it starts, you see they put it together and so forth. They struggle, they deny that it could collapse until the point they say that, hey, congratulate us, we saved our own conference. So it's very interesting, and I think there is the humor part of it. I wonder if they are patenting those songs that always come, because each and every
the merchandisers are busy outside. They are selling them.
It's a good way for them to raise money.
And just on your point about Baleka Mbete, I mean, she's got in for a lot of criticism, but I actually watched her very closely yesterday. I mean, criticism in Parliament. I mean, you know, there are 5,000 people sitting in a massive hall in Nasrec, and she handles it. I mean, and people must understand, it's an ANC process, so anybody can speak that they want to. And they show up, they stand at a mic, they show their hand, and she's managing 5,000 people on a floor who wants to speak.
Let's get back to the serious stuff now. What is at risk for Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma if she loses this conference?
Well, she's out, it's over. I don't think there is any problem. It might be a humiliating retirement for her, if that is the case. I mean, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, I don't think anyone is going to have to investigate her for anything. She has not wronged anyone, for that matter, as far as we know. So the only, the worst case scenario for her it's you know, she will just be displaced. Perhaps she will serve in the branches and so forth.
Or maybe make it to the NEC.
The question are the allies that are going to happen, her allies, the people who have brought her, you know, to where she is, the Premier League and so forth. Where would they go? And for me, if anyone thinks that those people or whoever is aligned with those people is going to be kicked out of the party, they don't understand how the ANC works. If you look at what is happening within the ANC, there is increasing trend of regionalization. If you move from here, power within the ANC is going to get more and more devolved to provinces, regions, and so forth. At some point, I think, going into the future, if you are the president of the ANC, if you are not in good line with some of the provinces, you're going to get recalled. President Jacob Zuma might be the last president of the ANC in recent times to be able to withstand pressure from regions and so forth, and as he managed to align it for his own sake. So it's going to be a very interesting, we're getting into very interesting political phase either way.
What is the risk if Cyril Ramaphosa loses?
You know, my feeling is also it's the end of the road for him in politics. I mean, he's not going to go and well, we know he's not going to be a deputy. So all that nonsense that people were talking beforehand, and I think both of us said that is nonsense, you know, that I mean, both of us, I think, said for a very long time that there's no way that either of those will serve as each other's deputies, you know. It just didn't make sense. And when people were talking deals, we were going, great, what's the deal though? Who steps back, who steps out, or who's going to be the deputy? Because that was always very clear that that was not going to be the case. So my sense is, and I think he gave us a little hint, he did an interview on, I think it was SABC the other night, where he was asked what would he do, you know, and of course people all want to know, will he form another party? You know, I have very serious doubt that he will do that. I don't think he has the appetite to do it. I think, you know, for him the risk of actually leaving his beloved ANC and then ending up on the opposition benches, it doesn't sit right. And he actually said he'll go
away. He's a billionaire after all.
True. And he said, you know, I will go where comrades deploy me, which is what every ANC member will ever say. And he would say, but maybe they will be kind enough to deploy me to go back to farming. Wouldn't that be nice? And you know, I think that was the throwaway sign. You know, I think it's the end for him then as well.
Look, of course, the two leaders probably have nothing to lose in the sense that, you know, their lives will continue, but I guess it's the lieutenants behind them. And there were some tweets that we found particularly interesting last night with, you know, known ANC people coming out quite openly and declaring who they're voting for. And we're going to put up the tweets in a bit right now. The first one being from Zizi Kodwa, the current spokesperson. And he said, I'm casting my vote for Comrade Ramaphosa for ANC president. Whatever happens, I trust he will restore confidence and inspire hope. It's early hours, but it's worth waiting for. That was at the earlier, at 7, it says 7 minutes past 4, but I understand it was the early hours of this morning. I found Zizi Kodwa quite interesting. The first thing that came to mind was the Zizi Kodwa who was with Fikile Mbalula against Thabo Mbeki, front in supporting Jacob Zuma. And obviously you would expect the logical conclusion to be that he would be with Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Melanie?
You know, and I'm always intrigued by a spokesperson, you know, who comes out that strongly, because I'm thinking you know, if you've got it wrong,
well, the next
you're not going to be the spokesperson.
Well, the NEC will choose a new spokesperson.
But I mean, I think, you know, Zizi's been doing a fairly good job. You know, yes, he's got the timing completely wrong so far in the conference, but we all love him for that, you know, saying that we are definitely starting at 9 on the first day, and we were all laughing at Zizi then. But anyway, I mean, yeah, it's interesting, and I mean, we've seen some of the other people. I'm sure you're going to pull that up.
Yes, we're going to actually show it up. I think the next one we've got is from Jackson Mthembu, Chief Whip of the ANC in Parliament. No surprises there because he has been the leading campaigner for Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, and he was declaring, I voted for Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa and other 5 incorruptible leaders. My vote is to save the ANC and my country. We must. That was 5 a.m. It's not 5 p.m., but it's actually 5 a.m. that he actually cast his vote. But he was also a Jacob Zuma lieutenant.
It's the same tweet as Zizi's tweet. They're talking about, Zizi's talking about restore confidence, saving my country. Does that mean those tweets are a tacit acknowledgement that they've contributed to the destruction? themselves, because they have been part of the system throughout. It is quite a concern. I mean, it's not a long time ago we were in Mangaung. I remember the shirt I was wearing in Mangaung conference. It's not like decades ago. So, and Mr. Jackson Mthembu was on fire there. Jackson Mthembu, Keith Khoza. I remember very well. They were at the forefront of communication for President Jacob Zuma when he got that second term. I mean, they were very aggressive. But they say in politics there are no permanent enemies, there are no permanent friends. But they seem to be shifting very, very rapidly. But what if they got it wrong?
Well, and I mean, for Jackson, there's a lot at stake because he is chief whip of the ANC in Parliament. And you're right, he's declared. I mean, we knew which way it was going for a long time in Parliament. But if he has it wrong, again, you know, by tweet, and this is a new thing, there's all this tweeting thing, remember, as well. I mean, this is the first time it's really playing such a big role, I believe, then it wasn't really that big. And so it's interesting it'd be interesting to see to what extent social media also impacts on this.
And of course, we have to remember for Jackson Mthembu, I think if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma faction wins, he is probably going to be out of power. Zuma also speaking to that in his closing address.
Indeed, it's going to be very difficult. I mean, he broke ranks with President Jacob Zuma. Actually, you could say he has built a platform of an internal opposition from within the ANC. As far as President Jacob Zuma sees it, I mean, he spoke about this, of not referring directly to him. So the problem is the level of extremism among some of the senior members.
In terms of flip-flopping?
Yeah, it's more like somebody telling you, Matladi, that they don't drink. The next day you find them so drunk they don't even know their name. You can't even say to that person.
I don't think that's the right example when it comes to Jackson Mthembu.
And that is not intended by all means.
And you know, I mean, it's important that it is sad if he's going to leave, because I actually think Jackson pulled that caucus together. There was enormous ill discipline in that caucus, and the parliament has become was a very weak parliament for a long time. Inexperience, partly to do with the fact that they did not keep many of the old members into the new parliament. You know, they tried to have a high retention rate. It didn't work out, so you had a lot of new inexperienced members, and they were really, it wasn't going well in parliament. And remember, he was then redeployed from, was it Luthuli House that he was put over into parliament to come and do things, and things really started getting better again in parliament. And it will be sad if he is lost from that position.
And at least there was, you know, some reclaiming face after what they did with Nkandla. But let's go to the third tweet, and this one is Mr. Razmataz himself, the current Minister of Police, Fikile Mbalula, and just voted for the mother Princess NDZ, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. History beckons dedication to all women, women power, Malibongwe. We're not surprised, but of course this is
declaration.
The declaration.
The declaration, Motlati, I mean, we're not surprised. Mbalula has been, you know, lobbying for NDZ for quite a while, and he nailed his colors to the mast. The declaration. What I worry about the declaration is that it doesn't create a good environment for unity after this. It makes it very difficult to manage this conference, any potential backlash, because when people are declaring, they don't need to declare. It's a secret vote. I really think that South Africa need to think about this thing of people declaring how they voted.
Why?
Some free.
It's
a secret vote. Actually, it's a secret vote, no doubt about it. But for you to declare, especially when you are in a place of authority such as that, it might amount to any attempt. It's just not, I don't really think it bodes very well with how you manage the result. I mean, we are not supposed to know exactly.
But you know, as a feminist, I don't like being the fact that he calls her a mother and a princess.
I found that quite offensive.
All he still had to throw in there was ex-wife, you know, like, I mean, then you've kind of done all the stereotypes of women. I mean, would you call Cyril father, prince?
King.
I mean, you know, if he was still, I mean, you know, he's saying dedication to all women. But also, I mean, Nkosazana has made the point, I mean, she's repeatedly said, if I win, I will win because of the following things attributes that I have, and because the ANC wants me. And by the way, also I'm a woman. You know, she's been trying to move away from saying, don't do this thing.
Just vote for me because I'm a woman. This is a challenge women
always face, and I don't. You know, as if I was her, I would say, don't call me a mother and a princess. You know, because certainly as a politician, she is. You want to say she's a good leader.
She's earned her stripe. You know,
Indeed,
she has really earned her stripe. we need to talk about predictions for the rest of the top 6. Obviously going into it, the slates have emerged, the ones that they had put forward have emerged. Those that didn't particularly have clear slates, like the likes of Zweli Mkhize, have now shifted aside. Nomvula Mkonyane, it would have split with the Maite Nkwana Mashabane vote. But from where I'm looking, we might actually end up with DD's unity slate emerging if you just go by the numbers, Ralph.
I mean, it is a very interesting picture that seems to be emerging there. You look at the spread of the nomination, of course, only as indications, no doubt about it. They know where directly translate into vote. But if you look at the declining, and you look at the pecking order below the position of deputy president, that is where opportunity for compromise might be coming out. Imagine if you are going to have whoever wins, you are likely to have Mashadile there. You are likely to have, Gweta Mantashe as well. You are likely to have Jesse Duarte there. One or another, Didi Mabuza there as well, and whoever wins. And I mean, this group of people, you cannot squarely locate them within a specific slate within the ANC. They can actually reach out. They can build, they can work towards unity. It will not be an achievement of unity if they end up with that kind of a list, with that kind of list of people on the top 6. But it is a good foundation to actually maybe use those people to reach out and consolidate and make sure the party coheres.
You're nodding them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and people who follow my columns on News 24 will know that 2 weeks ago I wrote about this, that I said, I think we're looking at this the wrong way around. We must look bottom up and not from top down. And I said at that stage that if you look at the nominations, actually the rest of the top 6 is becoming pretty clear. And I called it then that I said exactly what Ralph is now saying, is that the Didi Mabuza had more than double the amount of nominations that Lindiwe and Zweli together had at that stage already. And what was interesting was particularly that Cyril Ramaphosa got 87% of the support in the Eastern Cape, and yet Mabuza only got 3 votes less than Zweli Mkhize, and Lindiwe did very badly, and that's actually her home province. So that was very significant. So you saw suddenly that Didi Mabuza was getting support in provinces that was Ramaphosa provinces. So that was interesting. All along we could see that Gwedi was doing well in all the nominations, again in various, doesn't matter which faction of the provinces was there, and also Paul Mashatile did that, so you could see that was happening. And the question is going to be though, SG, that one is not clear. I mean, Ace got more nominations than Senzo Mchunu did overall, I think, but when you were looking at the branches, but I think he is he's much more controversial figure, and this whole Free State thing. And
it might just really taint the ANC's image to have somebody who's been taken to court, found guilty of flouting the regulations, I mean, this could coming back as an SG.
So I mean, it could result in a fracture within the Premier League. I mean, the closer we got to this, I've seen Didi playing the Premier League, and we've said this before. Didi knows there is a public perception around his credibility, no doubt. He knows it. He's an astute politician. But one thing he's also aware of is that he doesn't want the top 6 that have got credibility problems, including himself. He wants to be around people like Mashadile who do not have that serious problem.
And we saw it in the nominations for Mpumalanga that it was Paul Mashatile who emerged, it was Gweta Mantashe, and actually Senzo was actually emerged as the Secretary General. We're going to have to keep Polotiki a little bit shorter because in a few minutes' time we're expecting the Secretary General of the ANC, outgoing Secretary General Gweta Mantashe, to talk to the media about his organizational report. We know that some have said he was quite frank about the problems that are facing the ANC. But before we go, as the ANC gathers here, there are a lot more people interested in what happens here. And one of the people that are here, or the group that is here, is the Khoisan mass movement that are demanding that the ANC ensure that they are recognized in government. News 24 journalist News 24 journalist Lerato Sejake spoke to Anthony Philip Williams, the leader, and this is what he had to say.
We want the 54th conference of the ANC, number one, to come and meet us outside here. We are calling them. We've got a memorandum. We are calling on the new leadership of the ANC to come outside here and come and talk to us. We're also saying to this leadership and the delegates, you know that the Khoisan people have been here before anybody else. Doesn't matter how much of contest you come up with. The facts speak for themselves. We are asking this delegates to get the government to go back to the United Nations and go and ratify ILO 169, which is a statutory recognition for the indigenous nation of a country. And we are that people who have been here. If you take over here, just over here, you see that in the coat of arms, South Africa has given the highest honor of this country, has given it to the Khoi and the San. And also co-opted not only our symbols, but also co-opted our language within the coat of arms. But they just simply refuse to recognize us within the constitution of the country. You can't recognize us with the bill. We need constitutional recognition. So the constitution of South Africa needs to be amended.
Well, there was Anthony Philip Williams from the Khoisan Mass Movement speaking to News 24 journalist Lerato Sejake. We're going to have to leave it here for our special edition of Polotiki, but there is still more coming. We're going to be bringing you live ANC Secretary General Gwede Mantashe about his organizational report, and we will bring you analysis here on News 24, just in terms of how he has analyzed the problems that are facing the ANC. Thank you very much to our resident analysts, Melanie Verwoerd and Ralph Mateja. They will continue to be with us. My name is Mahlatse Mahlase. Thank you for joining us.